Hi, welcome back to my channel. For those who don't know me, my name is Katharine, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my January TBR or to be read list. So in the year 2025, if you haven't already seen my reading journal video for my Vlogmas series that I've been doing, go and watch that because I mentioned that in the year 2025, or just in general, not just in 2025, but just going forward, I want to read one nonfiction per month and one classic per month. So in this list, you'll see one classic and one nonfiction, and then the rest will be just other fiction books that I want to read throughout the month. So let's just get into this. I have 5 books on this list because on average I read about 5 books per month, so I want to keep this list really realistic in that I could get to these books in the month. Sometimes I read more than 5 books, sometimes I read less than 5 books, but 5 books tends to be like the average that I read per month because of the slow pacedness of how I read. I am not the type of person that can read like 15, 20, 25 books in a month. I tend to read about 1 to 1.5 books per week, and that tends to be around 5 books per month. So let's just get into this. I know some people like to make TBR lists, or to be read lists as I should put it, that are like super long, and I know that it's more about like having a pile of possibilities is what I've heard some people call it, where it's just like if you're a mood reader, as I am very much a mood reader, like you don't have to necessarily read all of those books on that list, but it's kind of like what you're in the mood for, and it's just a pile of possibilities that you could possibly read from. So that's a pretty good word or phrase to put your TBR or to be read list as, like it's a pile of possibilities. But let's just get into this. I like to make it so that I feel confident going into the month knowing that I can read these books, so that's why I try to make it pretty short. So let's just get into it. So the first book I'm going to share is a nonfiction, and it's been something that's been on my shelf for a very long time. And the reason why I want to read one nonfiction per month is because I do have a lot of nonfiction on my shelf. It's like not the majority on my bookshelf, I should say, but it does take up a decent amount of my bookshelf. Even though it's not the majority, there are still some there. So I want to try to get that down a little bit. So I have here, it's called More Than a Carpenter by Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell. I'm assuming they're related by the last name. But basically, I did the Disney College Program. If you aren't familiar with the Disney College Program, it's essentially like an internship where you can go and work at Disney when you're in college. I did that twice, one in Disney World in 2015 and then once in Disneyland in 2019. But the first time I did the Disney College Program in 2015, I was in Florida, and I was living in this apartment complex where I was up on like the 2nd or 3rd floor, and someone left this book like on the staircase. Like I went to go do laundry or something, and then I came back and I found this on the staircase, and I picked it up, and I actually posted in like the Facebook group that the Disney College Program students have. There's like thousands of people in it. It's just sort of like a community-based Facebook group. Like if people are needing answers to questions or whatever regarding the Disney College Program, they just go there and like they post. I don't know if they still have Facebook groups like that, but at least when I did the Disney College Program, there was a Facebook group where people would like post in it and ask questions and stuff. But basically, I had posted a picture of this book like on the Facebook group, and I was like, hey, like I found this on the staircase like leading up to like my apartment. I don't know if someone accidentally dropped this, and if it's theirs, like I have it if you want to come get it. But like almost immediately, like within the first like 15 minutes of me posting it, someone commented underneath it, and he said like, no, that was like on purpose. I placed it there for a reason. Like whoever picked it up, like, it's yours now, like, I want you to read it. So I felt like that was just like a Jesus and a God thing. Like, even though I was a Christian at that point, like, I think that this book was meant to be in my hands. And that was like, what, almost 10 years ago now that happened, 9.5 years ago that I picked this up, and I still haven't read it. So I'm gonna make it a priority to read this. So I'm just gonna read the back of it for you because, like, I'm really bad at describing books without having read it first. So it just says, skeptic Josh McDowell thought Christians were out of their minds. He ridiculed and insulted them, then decided to combat them with his own thorough research to disprove the claims of Jesus Christ. To his surprise, he discovered that the evidence suggested exactly the opposite, that Jesus, instead of being simply a first century Hebrew carpenter, truly was the God he claimed to be. So basically, like, what I'm assuming, this book is like similar to like God's Not Dead, if you've ever watched that movie. I think God's Not Dead is actually based on a true story. Or if it's not a true story, I know maybe it's based on a book. I don't know. Well, I know that God's Not Dead is based on something, whether it be a book or on true life or maybe even both. But this sounds like something similar to that, where it's like a skeptic who like does research into like disproving Jesus Christ, but then like through his research he actually like finds out that like Jesus Christ is truly who he says he is. And so that would be really cool to read about. I believe this is a really short book. Let me see how many pages are in this. So it's only like 168 pages, so it should be a fast read. I am sure that I'm going to enjoy this. Like, even though I am a Christian and I do believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, like, I think this would just be like an interesting read to like kind of, you know, encourage me in my faith. And also, like, if I ever meet someone maybe who is questioning Christianity or maybe isn't a believer in Jesus Christ, like, at least I can answer some of the questions that they have, and maybe this book would just test me and strengthen me and give me knowledge into apologetics. And if you don't know what apologetics is, it's basically like just defending your faith. So maybe this will give me that knowledge and wisdom to help me talk to people who aren't believers in Jesus Christ. So I'm really interested in getting to this because it's been on my TBR or to be read list for a very long time. And then the next book is the classic book that I was mentioning that I want to read, one nonfiction, which I just mentioned the nonfiction, and this is my classic that I want to read. So one classic and one nonfiction per month. This classic is, as you can already tell, is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. And so over the next few months, not just January, but like maybe I can read the whole rest of the Lord of the Rings series after I read this book, because I believe this is the prelude to like the Lord of the Rings. So I believe this is also a really short book, if I'm not mistaken, or let's just see here though. It says 305, so 305 pages. What am I talking about? I can't even speak today. But basically, I really want to just read this though, because like I want to get to the Lord of the Rings, and I heard you have to read this first. And so I'm really excited to get to this. I know that the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit are really popular, but let me just read the back of this book, the synopsis, so that you can understand what this book is about. It says, when Thorin Oakenshield and his band of dwarves embark upon a dangerous quest to reclaim their home from the ruthless dragon Smaug, Gandalf the wizard suggests an unlikely accomplice, Bilbo Baggins, an unassuming hobbit dwelling in peaceful Hobbiton. As they journey from the wonders of Rivendell to the terrors of Mirkwood and beyond, Bilbo discovers within himself unexpected qualities of courage and cunning, and with each step a newfound love of adventure propels him towards his great destiny, a destiny that waits in the dark caverns beneath the misty mountain, where a twisted creature known as Gollum jealously guards a precious magic ring. So I'm excited to get this. I know this is like one of the most beloved series, like The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and it's like a very classic fantasy series, and if like you were to get into fantasy, like this is like one of the like most defining fantasy series of all time. So like I'm really excited to get into this and the rest of the Lord of the Rings series, and hopefully in future months I can get to the other books as well. So those were my nonfiction and classic books, those two books. So let's just get into like the other fiction books that I want to get into. So the first book here is The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. I know they just made a movie about this, I believe, and I'm really excited to get to this. For those who don't know, like one of my favorite genres of like all time is historical fiction. I specifically like Christian historical romance. It's like my very niche genre of books that I absolutely love, but like just anything historical fiction is a go for me. Like I love just history in general, and if it's a fiction book, like I know I'm gonna love it. But basically, as you can probably tell by the title, it's a World War II fiction book, and I believe no, let me just read the synopsis, because knowing me, if I try to ad-lib the synopsis, I'm gonna mess it up. So it says, in April 1942, Lale Sokolov, a Slovakian Jew, is forcibly transported to the concentration camps at Auschwitz-Birkenau. I think that's how you pronounce that, concentration camp. When his captors discover that he speaks several languages, he is put to work as a Tätowierer, the German word for tattooist, tasked with permanently marking his fellow prisoners. Imprisoned for more than 2.5 years, Lale witnesses horrific atrocities and barbarianism, but also incredible acts of bravery and compassion. Risking his own life, he uses his privileged position to exchange jewels and money from murdered Jews for food to keep his fellow prisoners alive. One day in 1942, Lale, prisoner 32407, comforts a trembling young woman waiting in line to have the number 34902 tattooed on her arm. Her name is Gita, and in that first encounter, Lale vows to somehow survive the camp and marry her. A vivid, harrowing, and ultimately hopeful recreation of Lale Sokolov's experiences as the man who tattooed the arms of thousands of prisoners with what would become one of the most potent symbols of the Holocaust. The Tattooist of Auschwitz is also a testament to the endurance and love of humanity under the darkest possible conditions. So apparently this is based on a true story, even though this might be like a hybrid between nonfiction and fiction. I'm going to consider it fiction. I'm not going to consider it towards like my nonfiction book of the month. Like this is just going to be like a fun read for me. Like the Carpenter book that I just mentioned is going to be my nonfiction of the month, is what I'm trying to say. This is just going to be like a fun read for me, like one of my other like fiction books, even though it is based on a true story. And I hesitate to call it a fun read, because obviously this like is a very dark subject based on someone's life of like the Holocaust and everything. So I hesitate to call it fun. I know I just mentioned it being like a fun read, but like obviously this is a very dark subject, and I don't want to call it fun, but it's gonna be like one of my more enjoyable reads. That even sounds wrong to say, but what I'm trying to say, this is not going to be my nonfiction count. The Carpenter book is, but I'm really excited to read this. Like it always interests me, like this time in history, because it's just a time where like a lot of people were driven by hope to like get out of these really horrible situations, and like I'm hoping this has like a light at the end of the tunnel, where like even though horrible things do happen throughout the book, like at least maybe that there's like some hope by the end, is what I'm looking forward to in this book. So that's my third book that I plan to read in January. I also can't wait to watch the movie after reading that book. And then the next book that I want to read in January is a trilogy that I actually have been meaning to get to for a very long time because Francine Rivers is like one of my favorite authors of all time. She's a Christian fiction author, and I've been wanting to get to her Mark of the Lion series, and this is book one. It's called A Voice in the Wind, and apparently this is considered a biblical fiction book. And even though it's not based on anyone in particular in the Bible, it does take place like during biblical times. I think like almost as if it's in the book of Acts, like it's like very early church biblical fiction. So let me just read the back of this so that I can describe this book better to you. So apparently like the only synopsis that's really on the back of this book apparently says, torn by her love for a handsome aristocrat, a young slave girl clings to her faith in the living God for deliverance from the forces of decadent Rome. So basically it's about a slave girl living in Rome, and she like falls in love with an aristocrat, and she just basically has to like cling to her faith in God. And so I don't know too much about this book other than that like everyone tells me to read it, and I just love Francine Rivers, so like of course I have to read this. This is book one out of a trilogy, so there's 3 books in this series, and I can't wait to get to this one. And then the last book that I have on my January TBR or to be read list, as you couldn't already tell, it's the first book in the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. But of course, the first book in the Outlander series is literally called Outlander. But I'm really excited to get into this as well because as I mentioned before, I'm like a huge historical fiction person. Like that's like my preferred genre. So I can't wait to get to this. I have watched the TV series, but since finding out that it is a book series as well, and the TV series is based on the books, I stopped watching the TV show immediately as I found out, and then I've been meaning to read these books so that I can continue watching the TV series. So for those who don't know, I don't need to read the synopsis for this because I'm already familiar with the TV show. So basically it's about this woman named Claire, and she is living in the 1940s. She's like a nurse in World War II, and she's married, and she ends up going to these stones, and it's like a time travel type story, and she like actually travels back in time to like the 1700s in Scotland, and she basically falls in love with this Scottish guy named Jamie, and it's just like about their love story. And I'm really excited to get into this though, because like I've heard actually that the books are a little bit different than the TV show, so I'm curious to see like what is different in the books than the TV show, and I'm maybe wanting to watch the TV show from the beginning like as I'm reading these books, because like then I can like compare the differences and everything, even though I think I've watched up to season like 5 or 6 I believe, which honestly I got pretty far in the TV series because I think season 8 just came out if I'm not mistaken, and I've basically watched almost up to like the very end, but like I obviously haven't watched season 8 yet, so I'm not gonna watch that. And I forget how far I got into season 7 or season 6. I honestly don't remember where I stopped. I know I got pretty far into the TV show, so I definitely want to start it over once I'm reading the books, because like I want to see the differences in the books versus the TV series. But yeah, those are all the books that I want to read in January. Those are the 5 books that I'd love to get to. Let me know what you plan on reading in January, and if you read any of these books, how did you like them? And just comment down below, like, what are you reading? What did you think of these books if you read them? If you think that I should read something else during my time in January or just in 2025 in general, please let me know, because I'm always looking for new recommendations. So I enjoyed making this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Do all the YouTube things that you know how to do, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!